Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. An empire that lasted for over 1,000 years. A civilization that laid the foundations for Western law, language, architecture, and government. It rose from a small city-state on the Tiber River to command a territory stretching from the misty shores of Britain to the sun-scorched sands of Mesopotamia. Its legions were the most formidable fighting force the world had ever seen. Its engineers built roads and aqueducts that still stand today. Its story is an epic of legendary founders, brilliant generals, ambitious dictators, decadent emperors, and the relentless march of history. This is the story of unimaginable power, unparalleled glory, and a catastrophic collapse that echoed through the ages. This is the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Our story begins not with history, but with myth, a foundational epic that gave a divine and heroic origin to a people who would one day rule the known world. It starts in the smoldering ruins of Troy, where the hero Aeneas, son of the goddess Venus, escapes the city's fall, carrying his father on his back and leading his son by the hand. Guided by the gods, he embarks on a perilous journey across the Mediterranean, destined to found a new Troy in a distant land called Hesperia, or Italy. His descendants would establish the city of Alba Longa, a kingdom in the hills of Latium. Generations later, the throne of Alba Longa was usurped by the cruel Amulius, who deposed his brother Numitor. To eliminate any future claimants, Amulius forced Numitor's daughter, Rhea Silvia, to become a Vestal virgin, sworn to chastity. But the god Mars, captivated by her beauty, intervened. From their union, twin boys were born, Romulus and Remus. Fearing the prophecy that they would one day overthrow him, Amulius ordered the infants to be cast into the Tiber River. The basket carrying the twins, however, miraculously washed ashore at the base of the Palatine Hill. There they were discovered by a she-wolf, the Lupa, who suckled them and kept them alive until they were found by a shepherd named Faustulus and his wife. Raised as shepherds, the boys grew into natural leaders, strong and charismatic. Upon learning their true heritage, they returned to Alba Longa, led a revolt, killed Amulius, and restored their grandfather Numitor to the throne. Refusing to simply wait for their inheritance, they decided to found their own city near the place of their miraculous rescue. A dispute arose over who should be king and on which hill the city should be built. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, Remus the Aventine. They agreed to let the gods decide through augury, a ritual of observing birds. Remus saw 6 vultures first, but Romulus then saw 12. In the ensuing argument, tragedy struck. Remus was killed, leaving Romulus to found the city alone in 753 BC. He named it Roma after himself and plowed a sacred boundary, the Pomerium, around the Palatine Hill. This city, born from divine blood, fratricide, and a she-wolf's milk, would grow from this single hill to encompass 7, becoming the heart of a colossal empire. After its mythical founding, Rome was governed by a succession of 7 kings, a period shrouded in a mix of legend and fact. This era of monarchy, lasting over 2 centuries, came to a dramatic and violent end with its final tyrannical ruler, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud. His reign was marked by arrogance, bloodshed, and a profound disregard for Roman laws and customs. The catalyst for revolution, however, was not a political decree, but a deeply personal violation that would galvanize the Roman spirit. The king's son, Sextus Tarquinius, became obsessed with Lucretia, the virtuous wife of the nobleman Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. While the men were away at war, Sextus visited Lucretia's home, where he was welcomed as family. That night he entered her chambers and, threatening her with a dagger, brutally assaulted her. The next day, Lucretia summoned her father, her husband, and their trusted friend, Lucius Junius Brutus. She recounted the horrific events, and after making them swear an oath of vengeance against the Tarquins, she drew a hidden dagger and took her own life, choosing death over a life of dishonor. Her sacrifice was the spark that ignited the flames of rebellion. Brutus, who had feigned foolishness for years to survive under the tyrant's rule, drew the bloody dagger from Lucretia's chest and swore to expel the monarchy from Rome forever. He carried her body to the Roman Forum, where his impassioned speech detailing the crimes of the Tarquins and the tragic fate of Lucretia roused the populace to fury. In 509 BC, the people of Rome rose up, deposing Tarquin the Proud and exiling his entire family. The monarchy was abolished, never to return. In its place, a revolutionary new system of government was established: the res publica, the public affair, or republic. Power would no longer rest in the hands of a single, lifelong king. Instead, executive authority was vested in two consuls, elected annually, to ensure a balance of power. Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucretia's husband Collatinus became the first consuls. The Senate, an advisory council of elders, became the central institution of the state, guiding Rome through the turbulent centuries to come. The birth of the Republic was a defining moment, establishing the core Roman values of liberty, duty, and the rejection of tyranny. The newly formed Republic was not a sprawling power, but a vulnerable city-state, surrounded by a mosaic of hostile neighbors. For nearly 2 centuries, Rome fought for its very survival, battling the Etruscan city-states to the north, the Latin tribes on its borders, and the fierce highland peoples of the Apennines. A catastrophic event in 390 BC nearly extinguished the city's flame. A horde of Gallic warriors, led by the chieftain Brennus, swept down into Italy, shattered a Roman army, and sacked Rome itself. The city was burned, its people scattered. This profound humiliation forged a new Roman identity, one built on resilience, military discipline, and an unyielding determination to never be so vulnerable again. The city was rebuilt, its walls strengthened, and its army reformed. The rigid phalanx was replaced by the more flexible and effective manipular legion, a tactical innovation that would prove decisive. The true test of this new Rome came in a series of 3 brutal conflicts known as the Samnite Wars, fought over half a century for control of the Italian heartland. The Samnites were tough, mountain-dwelling warriors who matched the Romans in courage and skill. The wars were a grueling struggle that pushed Rome to its limits, but through perseverance and superior organization, the Romans ultimately prevailed, securing dominance over central Italy. With the Samnites subdued, Rome's gaze turned south, towards the wealthy Greek city-states of Magna Graecia. The city of Tarentum, fearing Roman expansion, summoned one of the greatest generals of the age, King Pyrrhus of Epirus. Pyrrhus arrived in Italy with a professional army and 20 war elephants, a terrifying sight for the Roman legions. He defeated the Romans in 2 major battles, but his losses were so staggering that they inspired the term Pyrrhic victory, a victory won at such a devastating cost that it is tantamount to defeat. The Romans, with their vast reserves of manpower, simply could not be broken. They wore Pyrrhus down until he was forced to abandon his Italian campaign. By 264 BC, Rome had achieved what no power before it had: the unification of the entire Italian peninsula under its control. This was not a conquest of pure subjugation, but a complex system of alliances, colonies, and grants of citizenship that transformed former enemies into loyal partners, providing the inexhaustible foundation of strength for the empire to come. Having mastered Italy, Rome now stood face to face with an equally ambitious Mediterranean power, the great maritime empire of Carthage. Located in modern-day Tunisia, Carthage dominated the trade routes of the Western Mediterranean, with its formidable navy and vast wealth. The collision of these two rising giants was inevitable, and their conflict, fought over more than a century in 3 devastating wars, would determine the fate of Western civilization. The First Punic War erupted in 264 BC over control of Sicily. It was primarily a naval struggle, a domain where Carthage was supreme and Rome was a novice. Yet, in a testament to their incredible adaptability, the Romans built a massive fleet from scratch. They engineered an ingenious boarding device, the corvus, a spiked bridge that could be dropped onto an enemy ship, allowing their superior infantry to turn a sea battle into a land engagement. After 2 decades of brutal warfare, Rome emerged victorious, seizing Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. The peace was short-lived. In Carthage, a deep-seated desire for revenge festered, embodied by the brilliant general Hannibal Barca. As a boy, he had sworn a sacred oath to his father to be a lifelong enemy of Rome. In 218 BC, he unleashed the Second Punic War, one of the most famous military campaigns in history. In a move of breathtaking audacity, Hannibal marched his army, complete with war elephants, from Spain, over the Pyrenees, and through the treacherous, snow-covered Alps, descending into Italy from the north. He inflicted a series of catastrophic defeats upon the Romans, culminating in the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, a tactical masterpiece of encirclement where he annihilated a Roman army nearly twice the size of his own. Rome was on its knees, its very existence hanging by a thread. But Rome did not break. It adopted the Fabian strategy of attrition, avoiding direct battle while harassing Hannibal's forces. A new Roman general, Publius Cornelius Scipio, emerged. Instead of confronting Hannibal in Italy, Scipio boldly took the war to Carthaginian territory in Spain, and then to Africa itself, forcing Hannibal to return home to defend his city. In 202 BC, at the Battle of Zama, Scipio finally defeated Hannibal, earning the title Africanus. Carthage was stripped of its empire, its navy, and its independence. The Punic Wars were over. Rome was now the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. By the middle of the 2nd century BC, the Roman Republic stood alone, an undisputed colossus astride the known world. The final, brutal act of the Punic Wars had concluded not with a treaty, but with an obliteration. In 146 BC, the great city of Carthage, Rome's ancient rival, was systematically dismantled, its fields sown with salt, a symbolic gesture of absolute annihilation. In that very same year, across the sea in Greece, the city of Corinth, a jewel of the Achaean League, was sacked and burned to the ground. These 2 acts of ruthless destruction sent an unmistakable message to every kingdom and city-state. Resistance was futile. The Mediterranean Sea, once a bustling highway of diverse cultures and competing powers, Greeks, Carthaginians, Egyptians, and countless others, was now, for all intents and purposes, a Roman lake. They called it Mare Nostrum, our sea, and the name was no idle boast. This unprecedented dominance, however, came at a profound internal cost. The spoils of empire flooded into Rome, a torrent of gold, silver, and human chattel that would warp the very fabric of the Republic. The traditional Roman economy, based on the small citizen farmer who tilled his own land and answered the call to arms, was being systematically destroyed. Vast agricultural estates, the latifundia, sprung up across Italy, owned by the senatorial elite and worked by legions of slaves captured in Rome's endless wars. The small farmer, bankrupted by long military service and unable to compete with slave labor, was driven off his land. He flocked to the city of Rome, joining a growing, volatile, and landless urban proletariat. The administration of this new empire also created new avenues for corruption. Provincial governors wielded near absolute power, far from the Senate's oversight, and many used their positions to extort unimaginable fortunes from the conquered peoples. A class of tax collectors, the publicani, bid for the right to collect taxes in a province, a system that incentivized the most ruthless exploitation. Rome had conquered the world, but in doing so, it had sown the seeds of its own internal decay. The wealth of the Mediterranean was concentrating in the hands of a few, while the very citizens who had built the empire were being dispossessed. This growing social and economic crisis was a powder keg, and it would not be long before a spark would ignite it. The deep cracks forming in the foundation of the Republic could no longer be ignored. The social crisis, born from imperial expansion, had created a chasm between the immensely wealthy elite and the dispossessed masses. It was into this volatile atmosphere that two brothers, scions of one of Rome's most distinguished families, stepped forward to challenge the established order. They were Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, and their attempts at reform would drench the Roman Forum in blood for the first time in centuries. In 133 BC, the elder brother, Tiberius Gracchus, was elected as a tribune of the plebs. Having witnessed firsthand the decline of the Italian peasantry while traveling through Etruria, he was moved to act. His solution was radical yet rooted in tradition. A land reform law, the Lex Sempronia Agraria, which would enforce an old, long-ignored limit on the amount of public land one individual could own. The excess land would be reclaimed by the state and redistributed in small plots to the landless poor. To the senatorial elite, whose vast latifundia were built on this public land, this was not reform. It was theft. The Senate, led by the Optimates, fought him at every turn. When they convinced another tribune, Marcus Octavius, to veto his proposal, Tiberius took an unprecedented step. He had the plebeian assembly vote to depose Octavius, shattering centuries of political custom. He passed his law, but in doing so, he had alienated the entire establishment. When he stood for re-election, another break with tradition, his enemies saw their chance. A mob of senators and their clients, led by the Pontifex Maximus himself, marched on the assembly, armed with clubs and broken furniture. Tiberius and hundreds of his followers were beaten to death, their bodies unceremoniously dumped into the Tiber. This act of brutal political violence was a Rubicon crossed. A decade later, his younger brother, Gaius Gracchus, took up the mantle. Elected tribune in 123 BC, Gaius was more ambitious and a shrewder politician than his brother. His program was a full-scale assault on senatorial power, He not only reenacted the land law, but also instituted state-subsidized grain for the urban poor, funded massive public works projects to create jobs, and attempted to extend Roman citizenship to the Italian allies. For 2 years, he was the master of Rome. But his ambition ultimately overreached. The Senate, fearing his power, painted him as a demagogue, aspiring to be a king. When he failed to win a 3rd term as tribune, his political protection vanished. A manufactured incident led the Senate to pass the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, a decree empowering the consuls to do whatever was necessary to protect the Republic. It was a declaration of martial law. Gaius and his followers were cornered on the Aventine Hill. Rather than be captured, Gaius ordered his personal slave to kill him. In the ensuing massacre, thousands of his supporters were hunted down and executed without trial. The Gracchi were dead, their reforms largely undone, but their legacy was profound. They had shown that the old political order was broken, and their blood had stained the path that would lead from political conflict to outright civil war. The brutal suppression of the Gracchi brothers did not solve the Republic's problems. It merely demonstrated that violence was now an accepted political tool. The next generation of Roman leaders would learn this lesson well, wielding not just mobs, but entire legions as their personal instruments of power. At the forefront of this new, terrifying era were 2 towering figures, Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Their rivalry would plunge Rome into its first full-blown civil war. Marius was a novus homo, a new man from outside the traditional Roman aristocracy, who rose through sheer military talent. Facing a manpower crisis and a protracted war in North Africa, Marius enacted a revolutionary military reform. He abolished the property requirement for military service, opening the legions to the landless urban poor, the very men displaced by the latifundia. He promised them pay, a share of the spoils, and, most importantly, a grant of land upon retirement. In a single stroke, he solved Rome's recruitment problem, but created a far more dangerous one. The Roman army was transformed from a citizen militia loyal to the state into a professional force whose loyalty lay with the general who paid them and guaranteed their future. His rival, Sulla, was his antithesis, a patrician of an old but impoverished family, an optimate who saw Marius as a dangerous demagogue. The collision course was set in 88 BC when a lucrative and prestigious command against King Mithridates of Pontus became available. The Senate awarded it to Sulla, the consul for that year. However, Marius, through a political ally, had a popular assembly override the Senate and grant the command to him instead. Sulla's response was unthinkable. He did what no Roman general had ever dared. He marched his legions on Rome itself. The city fell with little resistance. After declaring Marius and his supporters enemies of the state, Sulla departed for the east. But the cycle of violence was just beginning. While Sulla was away, Marius's allies retook the city. Marius returned from exile in Africa, and together with the consul Cinna, unleashed a bloody purge of his political enemies. The heads of senators were displayed on the rostra in the Forum. Marius was elected to an unprecedented 7th consulship, but he died of illness just days into his term, his vengeance fulfilled. 4 years later, Sulla returned from the east, victorious and battle-hardened. He landed in Italy and fought a bloody civil war up the peninsula, culminating in the horrific Battle of the Colline Gate just outside Rome. He emerged as the sole master of the Roman world. He then unleashed his own reign of terror. The proscriptions. Lists of his enemies were posted publicly. Anyone on the list could be killed with impunity, their property confiscated by the state. Thousands were murdered. Sulla had himself declared dictator for the reconstitution of the Republic, and used his absolute power to rewrite the constitution, strengthening the Senate and crippling the office of the tribune. Then, in a move that baffled history, he voluntarily retired. But the damage was done. Sulla had provided the ultimate blueprint for ambitious men to follow. Use a loyal army to seize the state. The Republic was a hollowed-out shell, waiting for the next warlord. While Rome's elites tore each other apart in their struggle for power, the foundation of their wealth and luxury, the institution of slavery, was groaning under its own immense weight. By the 1st century BC, Italy was saturated with slaves, the human spoils of conquest. They worked the mines, the fields of the latifundia, and served in the homes of the wealthy, often under conditions of unimaginable brutality. Many were also trained for the ultimate blood sport in gladiatorial schools. It was from one such school in Capua in 73 BC that the most famous slave rebellion in history would erupt, a desperate cry for freedom that would shake the Republic to its core. The rebellion began with a small group of about 70 gladiators, led by a Thracian named Spartacus. Armed with little more than kitchen utensils, they fought their way out of their barracks and fled to the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. What started as a minor breakout soon spiraled into a full-scale crisis. As news of their success spread, they were joined by thousands of other runaway slaves from the surrounding countryside, field hands, shepherds, and servants. This ragtag group, under the brilliant tactical command of Spartacus and his lieutenants, transformed into a formidable army. In the beginning, Rome badly underestimated the threat. They dispatched small, hastily assembled forces, which Spartacus's rebels ambushed and annihilated, capturing their weapons and armor. With each victory, their numbers swelled, reaching an estimated 70,000 or more. For 2 years, this slave army marched with impunity up and down the Italian peninsula, defeating 2 consular armies and striking terror into the heart of the Roman populace. The motivations of the rebels remain a subject of debate. It seems they were not a unified revolutionary force seeking to overthrow the Republic, but rather a desperate coalition of people who simply wanted to escape their bondage and return to their homelands in Thrace and Gaul. Panicked and humiliated, the Senate finally turned to the one man with the resources and ruthlessness to end the crisis: Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome. Given command of 8 legions, Crassus implemented a brutal and systematic campaign. He cornered Spartacus's army in the toe of Italy, building a massive wall to trap them. Though Spartacus managed a daring breakout, his army was finally brought to battle in 71 BC. The final confrontation was a slaughter. The rebel army was destroyed, and Spartacus himself fell in the heat of the battle, his body never identified. The Roman revenge was as terrible as the fear the rebellion had inspired. Crassus ordered 6,000 captured slaves to be crucified along the Appian Way, the main road leading south from Rome. For miles, the crosses lined the road, a horrific monument to the price of defiance. The great slave rebellion was over, but the specter of Spartacus would haunt the Roman imagination for centuries. A terrifying reminder of the violent and volatile world that lay just beneath the surface of their mighty empire. As the Roman Republic grappled with the internal decay of its institutions, two figures began to cast long shadows over its future: Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus and Gaius Julius Caesar. Their ascents, though intertwined, followed different paths, reflecting the complex and volatile politics of the era. Pompey, later known as Pompey the Great, had earned his military renown early. He was a protege of the dictator Sulla, and his campaigns against the remnants of Marian forces in Sicily and Africa, his suppression of the Sertorian revolt in Hispania, and most famously, his swift and decisive eradication of the Mediterranean pirates in 67 BC, had made him a popular hero. He was a master of logistics and grand strategy, a man the Senate turned to when faced with existential threats. His triumphs brought him immense wealth and a vast network of clients, particularly in the eastern provinces, which he had reorganized with formidable administrative skill. He was, for a time, the undisputed first man of Rome. In contrast, Julius Caesar's rise was more rooted in the intricate and often perilous game of Roman politics. Hailing from the ancient patrician Julian clan, which claimed descent from the goddess Venus, Caesar's family lacked the recent consular prestige of families like Pompey's. He allied himself with the populares, the faction that championed the cause of the common people, using his charm, intellect, and oratory skills to build a power base in the city. He served in various magistracies, steadily climbing the cursus honorum, the sequential path of public offices. His early career was marked by enormous personal debt, which he accrued by funding lavish public games and building a reputation as a generous patron. This was a calculated gamble, investing in political capital that he hoped would pay future dividends. The critical juncture came in 60 BC when these two ambitious men, along with the fabulously wealthy Marcus Licinius Crassus, formed an informal political alliance known as the First Triumvirate. This pact was a private agreement to subvert the Senate and control the Republic for their mutual benefit. Caesar needed their influence to secure the consulship for 59 BC and a subsequent proconsular command. Pompey needed Caesar to ratify his eastern settlements and secure land for his veterans. Crassus sought political influence commensurate with his wealth. This alliance of military genius, political cunning, and immense riches effectively sidelined the traditional republican government, setting the stage for a power struggle that would ultimately consume them all. Following his term as consul, the triumvirate secured for Caesar an extraordinary 5-year proconsular command over the provinces of Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum. This was the opportunity he had been maneuvering for his entire career. While Pompey was the celebrated general of the Republic, Caesar had yet to achieve a truly monumental military victory of his own. The Gallic Wars, which would last from 58 to 50 BC, would change that forever, forging Caesar into one of history's greatest military commanders and providing him with the tools to seize ultimate power. Gaul at this time was not a unified nation, but a volatile patchwork of hundreds of independent and often warring Celtic and Germanic tribes. Caesar, a master of divide and conquer, expertly exploited their internal rivalries. His initial pretext for intervention was the migration of the Helvetii tribe, which he portrayed as a threat to Roman territory. After decisively defeating them, he moved from one campaign to another with astonishing speed and audacity. He repelled the Germanic incursions of Ariovistus, conquered the Belgae in the north, and subdued the coastal tribes of Armorica. His campaigns were not merely acts of conquest, but also of brutal subjugation and political theater. He bridged the Rhine to campaign in Germania and launched 2 expeditions to Britain, ventures that, while of limited strategic value, captured the imagination of the Roman public. Caesar chronicled his own achievements in his Commentary de Bello Gallico, a masterpiece of political propaganda disguised as a straightforward military report. Written in clear, concise Latin, it portrayed him as a brilliant, decisive, and merciful commander, acting always in the interests of Rome. The reality was far bloodier. Ancient sources estimate that in 8 years of fighting, 1 million Gauls were killed and another 1 million enslaved. The climax of the war came in 52 BC at the siege of Alesia, where a united Gallic army under the charismatic chieftain Vercingetorix was trapped. In a feat of military engineering, Caesar's legions built 2 massive rings of fortifications, one to keep the Gauls in, and another to keep a massive relief army out. His victory at Alesia effectively broke the back of Gallic resistance. By the end of the war, Caesar had not only conquered a vast new territory for Rome, but had also amassed immense personal wealth from plunder and acquired something far more valuable: a hardened, fanatically loyal veteran army that would follow him anywhere. While Caesar was forging an empire and an army in Gaul, the political landscape in Rome was fracturing. The first triumvirate, the fragile alliance that had dominated the Republic, was disintegrating. In 53 BC, Marcus Crassus, seeking military glory to match that of his partners, launched an ill-fated invasion of Parthia. His catastrophic defeat and death at the Battle of Carrhae removed the crucial buffer between the 2 remaining giants, Pompey and Caesar. The death of Caesar's daughter Julia, who had been married to Pompey to seal their alliance, further severed their personal ties. With Crassus gone, the political dynamic devolved into a direct rivalry between the 2 most powerful men in Rome. Pompey, remaining in the capital, grew increasingly aligned with the conservative senatorial faction, the Optimates. They viewed Caesar's staggering success, his populist appeal, and his loyal army with growing alarm and envy. They saw him not as a Roman hero, but as a potential king, an autocrat who threatened the very foundations of the Republic. As Caesar's command in Gaul neared its end, a constitutional crisis loomed. Caesar wished to stand for the consulship in Absentia, which would allow him to transition directly from his proconsular command to the highest office without returning to Rome as a private citizen. This was critical, as a private citizen would be vulnerable to prosecution by his political enemies for alleged illegalities during his first consulship and his conduct in Gaul. The Senate, urged on by hardliners like Cato the Younger and now backed by Pompey, refused. They issued an ultimatum in January of 49 BC. Caesar must disband his army and return to Rome immediately. To comply would mean political suicide and the end of his career. To refuse would mean civil war. Caesar, encamped with his battle-hardened 13th Legion in his province of Cisalpine Gaul, faced a momentous choice. The border between his province and Italy proper was a small river called the Rubicon. To cross it with an army was an act of treason, an explicit declaration of war against the state. After a period of reported hesitation, on the night of January 10, 49 BC, he made his decision. Leading his soldiers across the shallow stream, he is said to have uttered the famous phrase, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. This single irreversible act plunged the Roman world into a devastating civil war, pitting legion against legion, Roman against Roman, in a conflict that would ultimately destroy the republic he claimed to be protecting. Caesar's march on Rome was executed with a speed that stunned his opponents. Pompey and the majority of the Senate, caught unprepared and overestimating their popular support in Italy, made the fateful decision to abandon the capital and retreat eastward to Greece. Their plan was to use the vast resources of the eastern provinces and their control of the sea to raise a massive army and crush Caesar. This strategic withdrawal, however, ceded the political and symbolic heart of the Republic to their enemy. After securing Italy and consolidating his position in Rome, Caesar first turned west, neutralizing Pompeian forces in Spain in a brilliant and swift campaign. He then set his sights on Pompey himself. In 48 BC, Caesar and his army crossed the Adriatic Sea, initiating the Greek campaign. Despite being outnumbered and facing logistical challenges, Caesar's tactical genius and the superior quality of his veteran troops proved decisive. The final showdown occurred at the Battle of Pharsalus in central Greece. In a stunning victory, Caesar's forces routed Pompey's much larger army. Pompey the Great, the celebrated conqueror of the East, fled the battlefield and sought refuge in Ptolemaic Egypt, hoping to rally support. Instead, the advisors to the young King Ptolemy III, seeking to curry favor with the victor, had Pompey assassinated as he stepped ashore. Caesar, arriving in Egypt shortly after, was presented with Pompey's severed head, an act he reportedly found repugnant. After a brief but intense involvement in the Alexandrian Civil War, which saw him install Cleopatra on the throne, Caesar spent the next few years mopping up the remaining pockets of senatorial resistance in Africa and Spain. With all his enemies defeated, he returned to Rome in 45 BC as the undisputed master of the Roman world. He was showered with honors and appointed dictator perpetuo, or dictator for life, an unprecedented move that shattered Republican tradition. As dictator, he initiated a series of ambitious reforms. He revised the calendar, planned vast public works projects, reformed the grain dole, and extended Roman citizenship to many provincials. While these measures were often practical and forward-thinking, his accumulation of absolute power deeply offended the senatorial elite. They saw his monarchical style and his disregard for traditional institutions as the final death blow to the Republic. A conspiracy began to form, led by men like Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, setting the stage for the Ides of March. The fragile peace of the Second Triumvirate was always a matter of convenience, not conviction. By the late 30s BC, the Roman world was effectively split in two. In the West, Caesar's heir, Octavian, consolidated his power base in Italy, presenting himself as the champion of Roman tradition and virtue. In the East, the brilliant general Mark Antony governed from Alexandria, entwined in a political and personal alliance with the last pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra VII. This division was not merely geographical, it was a chasm of culture and ideology. Antony, in the eyes of his rivals, had gone native. He adopted Eastern customs, and in the infamous Donations of Alexandria in 34 BC, he distributed Roman-controlled lands to Cleopatra and her children, a move that was pure propaganda gold for Octavian. Back in Rome, Octavian skillfully portrayed Antony as a man bewitched by a foreign queen, a traitor who intended to move the capital of the Roman world to Egypt and subjugate Rome under a Hellenistic monarchy. he illegally obtained Antony's will and read it to the Senate, revealing Antony's desire to be buried in Alexandria. This was the final straw. The Senate, manipulated by Octavian's rhetoric, declared war, not on Antony, a fellow Roman, but on Cleopatra. This clever political maneuver framed the impending civil war as a foreign conflict, a defense of Roman values against an ambitious foreign monarch. The inevitable confrontation came in 31 BC at the naval battle of Actium, off the coast of Greece. It was less of a heroic clash and more of a strategic disaster for Antony and Cleopatra. Faced with the superior fleet of Octavian's general, Marcus Agrippa, their forces were outmaneuvered. In a move that has been debated by historians for centuries, Cleopatra's squadron broke through the lines and fled the battle, with Antony abandoning his men to follow her. The sight of their commanders deserting them shattered the morale of their remaining forces, which soon surrendered. The war was effectively over. Octavian pursued the couple to Egypt, and in 30 BC, facing the capture of Alexandria, Antony and Cleopatra took their own lives. Octavian returned to Rome not as a conqueror in a civil war, but as the savior of the Republic from a foreign threat. He had learned from his adoptive father's mistakes. There would be no declaration of dictatorship for life. Instead, he would carefully, methodically, and brilliantly dismantle the structures of the Republic while claiming to restore them, accumulating titles and powers until he was the undisputed master of Rome, soon to be known by a new name, Augustus. With the suicide of Antony and the annexation of Egypt, the civil wars that had bled the Roman Republic for a century were finally over. The man now known as Augustus stood alone, the master of a vast and exhausted world. His greatest challenge, and his most enduring legacy, was to build a lasting peace from the ashes of war. This new era, the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, would last for over 200 years, an unprecedented period of stability and prosperity. Augustus was a political genius. He understood that Romans would never accept an overt king, so he cloaked his absolute power in the familiar robes of the Republic. He called himself princeps, or first citizen, rather than emperor or king. He meticulously maintained the Senate and other republican institutions, allowing them to function with apparent authority, while he held the true power, control of the legions, the treasury, and the final say in all major appointments. This constitutional settlement was a masterpiece of political theater. Having secured his power, Augustus set about transforming the city and the empire. He famously boasted that he found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble, initiating a massive program of public works that included new temples, theaters, aqueducts, and public baths. He established a professional fire brigade and police force, making the sprawling metropolis safer and more manageable. Beyond the capital, he reformed the tax system, built an extensive network of roads that connected the farthest flung provinces, and established a professional standing army, stationed permanently on the frontiers to defend against external threats. This security allowed trade to flourish as never before. Grain from Egypt, silks from the East, and metals from Spain flowed freely across the Mediterranean, now cleared of pirates. This economic boom funded a cultural golden age. Poets like Virgil, Horace, and Ovid created masterpieces of Latin literature, while the historian Livy chronicled Rome's epic story. Augustus carefully cultivated this cultural flowering, seeing it as a way to promote a new Roman identity, one centered on peace, piety, and traditional values. The peace was not absolute. There were still wars on the frontiers, most notably the disastrous loss of 3 legions in Germany. But for the vast majority of the empire's inhabitants, the Augustan age brought a security and prosperity their ancestors could only have dreamed of. Augustus had created a system of one-man rule, but he had failed to solve the problem of succession. His long reign was marked by personal tragedy as one chosen heir after another died before him. In the end, he was forced to settle on his stepson, Tiberius, a grim and reluctant ruler who took the throne in 14 AD. The Julio-Claudian dynasty had begun. Tiberius was a competent administrator, but deeply unpopular, his reign soured by treason trials and a paranoid retreat to the island of Capri, leaving the city in the hands of the ruthless Praetorian prefect, Sejanus. His death in 37 AD brought his grandnephew, the infamous Caligula, to power. Initially welcomed, Caligula's reign quickly descended into a fever dream of absurdity and terror. Ancient sources, though likely exaggerated, paint a picture of a mad tyrant who engaged in incest, declared himself a living god, and famously attempted to make his horse a consul. His short, brutal reign ended, unsurprisingly, in his assassination by the Praetorian Guard in 41 AD. In the chaotic aftermath, the guards discovered Caligula's uncle Claudius hiding behind a curtain. Long dismissed as a physically weak and stammering fool, Claudius was proclaimed emperor on the spot. To everyone's surprise, he proved to be one of the most effective rulers of the dynasty. He was an intelligent administrator who expanded the imperial bureaucracy, undertook major public works, and, most notably, oversaw the successful Roman conquest of Britain. Yet his reign was plagued by the machinations of his ambitious wives, culminating in his probable poisoning by his final wife, Agrippina the Younger. Her motive was simple: to clear the way for her own son, Nero. Nero's reign began in 54 AD under the promising guidance of his tutor, the philosopher Seneca. But his darker impulses soon took over. He murdered his mother, his first wife, and countless others who stood in his way. His obsession with the arts and his public performances as a singer and chariot racer scandalized the traditional Roman elite. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD became a turning point. Though he likely didn't start it, he used the cleared land to build his lavish golden palace, and to deflect blame, he initiated the first major persecution of Christians. His tyranny and extravagance finally led to widespread rebellion, and in 68 AD declared a public enemy by the Senate, Nero took his own life, uttering the famous last words, "What an artist dies in me." The Julio-Claudian line, the direct family of Augustus, was extinct. The death of Nero in 68 AD plunged the Roman Empire into the abyss. With the last of Augustus's line gone, the carefully constructed illusion of a restored republic vanished, revealing the raw truth of the Principate. Power came from the sword. The year that followed, 69 AD, would become infamous as the Year of the Four Emperors, a bloody and chaotic scramble for the throne that proved the legions were now the ultimate kingmakers. The first to claim the prize was Servius Sulpicius Galba, the elderly governor of Spain. He marched on Rome and was accepted by the Senate, but his reign was doomed from the start. He was a stern disciplinarian who refused to pay the donatives promised to the soldiers who had supported him, and he quickly alienated the powerful Praetorian Guard. His miserly and severe approach made him deeply unpopular, and after just 7 months, he was brutally murdered in the Roman Forum by the very guards sworn to protect him. His successor was Marcus Salvius Otho, a former friend of Nero, who had bribed the Praetorians to carry out the assassination. Otho's reign was even shorter. While he enjoyed support in Rome, the powerful legions stationed on the Rhine frontier had already declared their own commander, Aulus Vitellius, as emperor. The two armies clashed at the Battle of Bedriacum in northern Italy. Otho's forces were defeated, and rather than drag the empire into a prolonged civil war, he chose to commit suicide after a reign of only 3 months. Vitellius then entered Rome, not as a disciplined general, but as the leader of a riotous army. His brief rule was characterized by feasting, extravagance, and a lack of political skill. While he dallied in the capital, a far more dangerous challenger was emerging in the east. The legions in Judea and Egypt, tired of the chaos in Rome, proclaimed their own commander, Titus Flavius Vespasianus, Vespasian, as emperor. Vespasian was a rugged, experienced, and pragmatic general from a non-aristocratic family. He secured control of Egypt's vital grain supply and sent his legions westward. The final, horrifying act of the civil war was fought in the streets of Rome itself, as Vespasian's forces battled the loyalists of Vitellius. Vitellius was captured, dragged through the streets, and killed. At the end of this brutal year, Vespasian arrived to restore order, founding the Flavian dynasty and proving a new dangerous principle. An emperor could be made anywhere in the empire, not just in Rome. The assassination of the tyrannical Domitian in 96 AD could have plunged Rome back into the bloody chaos of civil war. Instead, it ushered in an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity, a golden age later immortalized by the historian Edward Gibbon. This was the age of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty, better known as the 5 Good Emperors. The genius of this system lay in its solution to the perennial Roman problem of succession. Rather than relying on the lottery of birth, each emperor, starting with the elderly Nerva, chose his successor based on merit and ability, formally adopting him as his son and heir. This ensured a seamless transfer of power to proven administrators and capable military leaders. Nerva's choice, Trajan, was a brilliant general who expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent, conquering Dacia, modern-day Romania, and campaigning deep into Parthian territory. The wealth from these conquests funded a massive public works program, including the magnificent Forum of Trajan in Rome. His successor, Hadrian, was a different kind of ruler. A cultured intellectual and an avid traveler, Hadrian understood that the empire had reached its logistical limits. He abandoned Trajan's easternmost conquests and focused on consolidation and fortification. He spent more than half of his reign touring the provinces, strengthening defenses, and commissioning architectural marvels, the most famous being the Great Wall in northern Britain that still bears his name. Following Hadrian came the peaceful and pious reign of Antoninus Pius, a 23-year period so stable and uneventful that it is often overlooked by history. Yet it was perhaps the true peak of the Pax Romana. The last of the 5, Marcus Aurelius, embodied the Platonic ideal of the philosopher king. His personal writings, known as the Meditations, reveal a man of profound Stoic principles. Yet, his reign was far from tranquil. He spent years on the northern frontier fighting relentless wars against Germanic tribes and contended with the devastating Antonine Plague, which swept through the empire, killing millions. Despite these immense challenges, his leadership held the empire together. This period, from Nerva to Marcus Aurelius, represented Rome at its zenith, a sprawling multicultural empire governed by reason, law, and a sense of duty, a model of stability that would not be seen again for centuries. The golden age of the Antonines came to a shuddering halt with the death of Marcus Aurelius. His decision to pass the throne to his biological son, the unstable and megalomaniacal Commodus, broke the chain of adoptive succession and set the stage for disaster. The assassination of Commodus in 192 AD ignited a brief but brutal civil war from which Septimius Severus emerged victorious, establishing a new military dynasty. His advice to his sons, enrich the soldiers and scorn all other men, became the fatal policy of the next 50 years. This period, from 235 to 284 AD, is known as the crisis of the 3rd century, a time when the Roman Empire came perilously close to complete collapse. The empire was torn apart by a seemingly endless cycle of civil war, foreign invasion, and economic ruin. The legions, now the true power brokers, repeatedly murdered their own emperors and razed their commanders to the purple. In this 50-year span, there were at least 26 claimants to the throne, with an average reign of just 2 years. Nearly all met a violent end. This internal chaos left the frontiers dangerously exposed. To the north, Germanic confederations like the Goths and the Alemanni smashed across the Rhine and Danube rivers, raiding as far as Greece and Italy. To the east, the aggressive Sasanian Empire of Persia posed an existential threat, culminating in the ultimate humiliation, the capture of the Emperor Valerian in battle in 260 AD, who died a prisoner of the Persian king. The empire itself began to fracture. In the west, the Gallic Empire broke away, comprising Gaul, Britannia, and Hispania. In the east, the brilliant Queen Zenobia of Palmyra carved out her own independent kingdom, controlling Egypt and the vital grain supply. The economy was in freefall. To pay the soldiers who kept them in power, emperors systematically debased the currency, reducing the silver content of coins until they were little more than bronze tokens with a silver wash. This triggered runaway hyperinflation, destroying trade, savings, and the tax base. It was only through the tireless efforts of a series of tough, pragmatic soldier emperors, most notably Aurelian, who earned the title Restitutor Orbis, or Restorer of the World, that the empire was brutally stitched back together. But the wounds were deep, and the Rome that emerged was a changed and hardened entity. Out of the ashes of the 3rd century crisis rose a figure of immense will and revolutionary vision, Diocletian, a low-born Illyrian soldier who ascended to the throne in 284 AD. He understood that the empire of the past was gone forever. The old system was broken, and radical, even brutal, reforms were necessary for survival. His most audacious innovation was the tetrarchy, the rule of 4. Recognizing that the empire was too vast for one man to govern, he divided it into eastern and western halves. He ruled the east as the senior emperor, or Augustus, and appointed a trusted colleague, Maximian, as the Augustus of the west. Each Augustus then adopted a junior emperor, or Caesar, who would assist them and eventually become their successor. This was a direct attempt to solve both the problems of administration and succession that had plagued the previous century. Diocletian's reforms were sweeping and autocratic. He transformed the emperor from princeps, or first citizen, into dominus, or lord, adopting the elaborate court rituals of the Persian monarchy. He reorganized the provinces, separated civil and military authority, and attempted to curb hyperinflation with the edict on maximum prices, though this ultimately failed. He also initiated the Great Persecution, the most severe and systematic assault on Christianity in the empire's history. But the Tetrarchy, a system built on loyalty, could not survive the ambitions of its members. After Diocletian's voluntary abdication, it collapsed into a new round of civil wars. From this conflict, one man emerged supreme: Constantine. His pivotal moment came in 312 AD at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, where, according to tradition, he saw a vision of a cross in the sky with the words, "In hoc sino vinces." In this sign, you will conquer. After his victory, Constantine embraced Christianity. The following year, the Edict of Milan granted religious tolerance throughout the empire, ending the persecutions and fundamentally altering the course of Western civilization. Constantine would go on to reunite the entire empire under his sole rule and establish a new capital in the east, a new Rome on the site of Byzantium, which he named Constantinople. The empire now had a new capital and a new god, setting a course that would define the next millennium. The traditional date for the fall of the Western Roman Empire is 476 AD, the year the last emperor, a young boy ironically named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. Yet, this single event was not a cause but a final symptom of a long and complex decline. The fall was not a sudden collapse, but a slow, agonizing transformation over generations, driven by a confluence of internal decay and overwhelming external pressure. The internal weaknesses were profound. The political system, despite the efforts of Diocletian and Constantine, remained chronically unstable. The West suffered from a series of weak, ineffectual emperors who were often mere puppets of powerful barbarian generals. The economy was shattered. Incessant warfare, oppressive taxation, and the abandonment of farmlands hollowed out the middle class and created a vast gulf between the super-rich aristocracy and the impoverished masses. The empire's military had also fundamentally changed. The citizen-soldier legions of the past were gone, replaced by an army composed largely of Germanic mercenaries. These foederati, while effective fighters, had little loyalty to the Roman state they were paid to defend, and their allegiances could shift with deadly consequences. This internal rot coincided with an unprecedented wave of external migrations. In the late 4th century, the terrifying Huns swept out of Central Asia, displacing the Gothic tribes and forcing them to seek refuge inside Roman territory. The Romans' mistreatment of these refugees led to the disastrous Battle of Adrianople in 378, where an entire Roman army and the Emperor Valens himself were annihilated. This defeat shattered the myth of Roman invincibility. The floodgates were open. In the early 5th century, Vandals, Suebi, and Alans poured across the frozen Rhine, while the Visigoths, led by Alaric, marched down the Italian peninsula and accomplished the unthinkable: the sack of the city of Rome in 410. For the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City had fallen to a foreign enemy. More sacks would follow, most notably by the Vandals in 455. The empire bled territory. Britain was abandoned, Gaul and Spain were lost to Germanic kingdoms, and North Africa, the breadbasket of the West, was conquered by the Vandals. By 476, the Western Roman Emperor controlled little more than Italy itself. When Odoacer sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople, he was merely acknowledging a reality that had been decades in the making. The Western Empire was no more.